you. See, I don't know why the fuck I'm fucking with you. See, I don't know why the fuck I'm fucking with you. Say, I don't know why the fuck I'm fucking with you.
What up guys, Ali here and welcome to Ali Talks Music. Add me on Instagram at Ali Talks Music as well. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Now let's get into the video. The 90s was a great time for hip-hop as a whole. It saw the rise of Biggie, Tupac, Jay-Z, and DMX amongst others. During this time period, another lesser-known act was establishing their place in the game, and they go by the name Slum Village. In the beginning, the group consisted of 3 friends who went to the same high school in Detroit and shared a love of hip-hop and rap battling. These high school students were T3, Barton, and J Dilla. We actually all met while we were in high school. I had a group I was already in with Barton, and we kept hearing about this kid named James Yancey. We heard that he made beats, so we were interested in meeting him and hearing his stuff. We ended up connecting with him and going over to his house one day. We went there, and he took us straight to where he had this old school drum machine. He started playing some of his beats, and they were dope, and really just from there we just kept doing stuff together. We were always hanging around each other here and there in high school. Well, when he was in high school, because he wasn't there a lot. They formed part of a 5-man rap group with 2 other friends called Scene Pod in high school, the name being Dopeness in reverse. But the group did not last, breaking up and re-emerging once again in the form of Slum Village. Here is where it gets a little bit complicated. Though Slum Village remained a group from straight out of high school until their debut, J Dilla was the more focused member of the group. He pursued work as a solo artist as well and rose to prominence in the underground hip-hop scene. Around 1992, Dilla met fellow musician Am Fiddler, who let him use his music workstation, and the pair soon became friends after that. Dilla was starting to make ties in the music industry. Fiddler met Q-Tip, who was also performing in the lineup, and introduced him to J Dilla shortly after that. Dilla then gave Q-Tip a demo for Slum Village, and the rest was history.
Hold tight, this is the last time you hear me. I'm out now, this is the last time to cheer me.
Am Fiddler introduced me to Dilla in '93. I believe it was on the Lollapalooza tour in Detroit. It was pretty instant. He gave me his demo for Slum Village and I heard the music and it was dope. And right from then I knew J Dilla messed around and made music with a few other artists and groups for the next 2 years while doing a lot of work with Q-Tip. A lot of his work went uncredited, but he worked with the likes of Janet Jackson and Busta Rhymes. Around 1996, J Dilla was ready to fully commit to Slum Village, and alongside T3 and Barton, the group produced the material for their debut album, Fantastic Volume 1.
These y'all niggas just gotta test the S. It's the Fantastic, I'm a ride.
Around this time, the group almost broke up after T3 and Dilla confronted Barton about selling drugs on the side. As a result, Barton left the group just prior to their debut. He eventually reconciled with his group, and Slum Village was whole once more. Although Fantastic Volume 1 was not officially released until 2006, it was heavily bootlegged and generated a lot of buzz for the upcoming artists. By 1998, the group had landed their first recording contract with Barack/A&M Records. They completed work on their second album to be titled Fantastic Volume 2 later in the year, although it would be their first proper studio album to be released to the public. Unfortunately, Barack/A&M became defunct before they could release an album, leaving Slum Village in a limbo for about a year. According to Slum Village, Corrupt is the reason A&M Records tanked. We got our first deal with A&M Records, but what happened was we got our deal and it was around the same time that Corrupt dropped that double album. That album did so bad that they basically shut down the whole rap department at A&M. And no disrespect to Corrupt, because he's one of my favorite MCs, But that is really what happened. During this time, J Dilla continued to build his name as a producer, working with other greats of the time, including Common, Erykah Badu, and A Tribe Called Quest. And luckily, by around the year 2000, the group had signed with Good Vibe Recordings and Baroque Records, and finally Fantastic Volume 2 was released to the public. The album was preceded by 2 singles, Get This Money and I Don't Know.
I don't know why the fuck I'm fucking with you.
Another 2 singles followed, namely Climax and Raise It Up. The album, as well as its singles, were critically praised but failed to find their mark with the public, not landing on a single chart. Unfortunately, they continued to struggle with their label, and barely a month after Fantastic Volume 2 was released, they dropped another album with a different label. The album was actually an EP called Best Kept Secret and was released under the alias J88 through the label Groove Attack. Presumably, they used the alias J88 because they had not yet broken their contract with Good Vibe Recordings. The EP featured mainly production work from J Dilla, with a few exclusive remixes by Madlib and IG Culture. Although no singles were released from the album, The Look of Love Part 1 remains one of their most listened to songs to date.
You know what love is. Say it with me now. You know what love is.
The group continued to struggle with finding a label to match their energy, and by the end of the year 2000, J Dilla had had enough of group work and left the group in order to pursue a solo career, although he maintained his friendship with Barton and T3 and would continue to produce for Slum Village as a whole. Slum, my family, my heart, oh man. But still, just for motherfuckers that don't know, that's still my peoples. They're doing their thing, you know? I'm slow as hell with my shit. I'm still working on my shit, but I want to make sure that when it comes out, it's solid. Now this is where things get a bit more interesting. Barton and T3 made the controversial decision to replace J Dilla with a new member called Elzai.
You know my MO, trim fro, brim low, gems glow, Timbo, slim ho in my limo. That's a pattern right there. That's like MO, trim fro, brim low, gems glow, Timbo, slim ho in my limo. That's a 7 pattern right there, right? But then you have a joint where I say, imagine it. I have your clique and your management disappear and vanish half as quick as a magic trick.
Fans were divided on whether or not they supported this decision, as half of them believed that J Dilla could not be replaced. The other half of fans were excited to see what the group would do, especially considering J Dilla left the group to pursue his own dreams. Eventually, the newly reformed group signed with Capitol Records and released their second studio album, 4th album overall, under the title Trinity, Past, Present, and Future. In comparison to their earlier works, this album had an intense mashup of producers, including T3, J Dilla, Young RJ, Keep Him in Mind, and Scott Storch, amongst others. Interestingly enough, one of their producers that worked on the album was Rasheed, one of the initial members of ScenePod. Remember them? The original form of Slum Village? He remained a close friend of the group right from its inception and went on to be an impressive producer in his own right. Only 2 singles were released from this album, one of which would go down as one of their best and most recognized songs. The singles were Disco and Tainted, featuring the upcoming artist Dwele.
Think of her, think of me, think about us. Yeah. So good. How many hits does it take for a record to blow?
By this point, the group had reached greater heights. Their album had finally made a meaningful impact on the charts. It landed on number 20 on the US Billboard 200. In addition, the single Tainted finally made a lot of noise for the group. Despite J Dilla initially being credited as the reason behind the group's success, it seemed that his departure from the trio as an active artist may have boosted their morale and drive to succeed. With J Dilla out of the picture, T3 and Barton had no choice but to step up and take control. Incidentally, the fans' concerns about the group losing its essence after J Dilla's departure proved unfounded, as the group continued to rise in strength with JD no longer in the core lineup. Now here's where things take a twisted turn for the group. Shortly after the release of Trinity, Barton began to experience health problems and fits of rage. Many rumors began to circulate that he was on drugs, and all came to a head when he fell into a coma shortly after Trinity's release. He had always been a deeply spiritual person, and his music had consistently proved positive, so it came as a shocking blow to his friends and groupmates when he began having aggressive fits. The problems began to interfere with their touring and recording schedule, eventually resulting in him leaving the group. Now around the year 2002, as a result, fairly little information about Barton's health was released to the public, and it was publicly announced that he had chosen to leave the group around 2003. However, Barton felt like he was kicked out of Slum Village. I was dealing with a lot of mental health issues, not enough rest, jet lag. I underwent physical ailment. I came home from tour and said I wasn't gonna do it no more. When I tried to seek some attention, they took it like I was leaving the group. I was in a coma for a day. When I came out my coma, all my stuff was out of my condo. I lost all my cars, I lost everything. And I got a termination letter from the group. Barton also implies that his former group members abandoned him. I had no support from the guys in Slum Village whatsoever. They didn't come to visit me in the hospital at all. It was confirmed that he suffered from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and manic depression in addition to a drug problem, and it all boils down to the question of whether or not he left or was terminated. Following Barton's departure, the group continued on as a duo with T3 and Elzai, while Barton himself pursued a solo career. Unlike Dilla, Barton was vocally salty about Slum Village. He continued to present the image that he had been kicked from the group and publicly stated that while he would rejoin Slum Village, he needed an apology first. In the period that followed, T3 and Elzai recorded and released their fourth album for Slum Village, one that was titled Detroit Deli, A Taste of Detroit, and contained one of the biggest hits of their career. The album was released around 2004 and was preceded by the single Selfish, which was produced and featured on by rising star Kanye West and featured vocals by the then unheard of John Legend. Selfish is their biggest hit to date, and in my opinion, this song is a classic.
I'm selfish. I want you to myself, I can't help it.
The album was also successful, though not as successful as Trinity on the charts, landing at number 37 on the US Billboard 200. The album had slightly less production work by J Dilla, but he was present, and the duo was set to record with the two departed members on the closing track of the album on a track called Reunion. Though J Dilla was super keen and delivered some stunning bars on the track, Barton was still upset with his former group and refused to participate despite a lot of effort on T3, Elzai, and J Dilla's part. They eventually recorded the track without him and dropped the album. Unfortunately, thereafter, Slum Village parted ways with Capitol Records and never again achieved their previous status. Around 2005, they released Slum Village alongside the single Easy Up through the independent label Barack. Unfortunately, the album was a flop and didn't make it to the Billboard 200. They released Slum Village, prequel to a classic. The group then became scattered and discordant and didn't release much music until around 2009. But what happened to J Dilla and Barton? Around 2006, after a successful production and solo career, J Dilla passed away. He had been diagnosed with TTP and lupus and fell sick very quickly and suddenly. He was hospitalized around 2004, and by the end of 2005, he had been confined to a wheelchair. In that same year, on the week of his birthday, he passed away. He compiled a beautiful instrumental album from his hospital bed titled Donuts, which is still beloved to this day. He was survived by his mother and two daughters, who went on to form the J Dilla Foundation, which works to cure people of lupus. Around this time, Barton was homeless and had developed a crack habit in addition to his mental illness. In the time since he had left the group, he had gone by the name Barton the Slumlord, but had released no music. He was supposed to release an album titled Titus Chapter 10 Verse 13, but it never materialized. At this point, he had fallen completely off the wagon and was a liability. After J Dilla's death, Barton began to clean up his act, and by 2008, Barton made amends with the other group members and rejoined T3 and Elzhi, forming Slum Village once more.
No longer formerly known as Barton or Slum Village, it's Slum Villa, baby.
After their reunion, the group immediately began to work on their next album. They released a 20-minute EP in 2009 called Villa Manifesto, but their actual album was supposed to come out around 2010. Unfortunately, before they completed recording, Barton was found dead in his home on July 31st of 2009. After a homicide investigation, it was announced that he had died of an accidental cocaine overdose. He was survived by his son and daughter, as well as his sister. To honor their fallen comrades, T3 and Elzhi continued to work on the album and released the completed project, Villa Manifesto, almost a year after Barton died.
We lock it down. Who? We lock it down. Yeah. Lock it down. L. Lock it down. Lock it down. Lock it down. Lock it down. Lock it down.
The album featured Barton as a main artist, alongside unreleased vocals by J Dilla. The entire album was a beautiful homage to Slum Village, from its early founders to its current creatives. Faster was the only single released. Villa Manifesto was not a huge success. In fact, if we're talking about sales, it was a flop. Unfortunately, the new harmony that the group found could not last forever. And shortly after Villa Manifesto came out, Elzhi departed the group after some internal conflict between the members. Too many cooks, I suppose. Following Elzhi's departure and Barton's untimely death, Slum Village was reduced to T3 and T3 alone. After a lot of consideration, he brought in Illa J and Young RJ as replacements for his former comrades. Illa had grown up around Slum Village, watched it take shape and grow, and wanted to ensure that his brother's legacy was well represented. Young RJ had been producing for the group since the days of J Dilla, so him being added to the group made sense. They released a few mixtapes and EPs, and laid low to work on their next album. 3 years later, they released their final product in the form of Evolution around 2013 through their label. Unfortunately, despite all of their work, the rebrand did not entirely take. With Illa and Young RJ rapping Dilla and Barton's verses while on tour, the group soon began to feel like a cover band. After Evolution failed to chart at all, Illa J pulled back. He felt like he could not stand in for his brother anymore and decided to pursue a solo career. Young RJ and T3, on the other hand, continued to soldier on forward. They continued to promote Slum Village and released another project titled Yes around 2015. The album was a slight backtrack and relied heavily on the fumes of their early success. 9 of the 12 tracks were produced or co-produced by J Dilla, who passed almost 10 years prior. So yes, it sounded very dated. It also featured vocals by both him and Barton, and you guessed it, it failed to make it on the charts. The group released another album called Slum Village Volume 0, and once again, it went unnoticed. They have not released another album since. Today, Slum Village is barely a shadow of its former self. They continue to release mixtapes and EPs, but their most popular tracks came out over a decade ago. Despite this, they still continue to do shows and are currently on tour in Europe. If you want to find them on IG, their handle is @officialslumvillage. The same goes for their Twitter. Individually, both T3 and Young RJ have dedicated their lives to the group. They still seem to be rapping Slum Village and might continue to do so for the foreseeable future. Slum Village get about 1.3 million monthly listeners on Spotify, and their most popular songs on the platform are Fall in Love, Selfish, The Look of Love, Get This Money, and Tainted.
It's over here, it's over here, it's over there, it's over here, right here, it's over there, right here, it's over there, right here, it's over there, right there. Ladies love my lyrics, it's like some sex shit. Yo, niggas trying to come with your mic like it's a deal.
That's it for me, it's your boy Ali. What happened to Slum Village in your opinion? Let me know down below. Video requests, be sure to let me know down below as well. Also add me on Instagram at Ali Talks Music. Till next time, peace.